Welcome back to Upside Down Data. We really need to talk about Cardano. So ADA is the native token of Cardano, and it has been absolutely ripping since election day. If we just go ahead and measure this, it is up over 200% in a very short amount of time. One of the best performing major crypto assets that there is. And if you're not familiar, Cardano is a layer 1 blockchain. It's basically a place where decentralized applications, think like decentralized exchanges, decentralized lending and borrowing platforms, among other things, can build on top of it. And really, it is built to prioritize decentralization and security. Those were some of the trade-offs that were made, that it gave up a little bit on some of the speed aspects. So of course, there are things in the works to help speed it up, but then to try to lock down security and decentralization, whereas some other competitors like Solana really have kind of let security be what they give up in the name of things like speed and cheapness. So it has been absolutely pumping. And one of the catalysts that has led to this is that Charles Hoskinson, who is the founder of Cardano, has actually been in a lot of conversations about joining the Trump administration as an advisor on crypto policies and talking to different lawmakers. This has really gotten Cardano front and center. And so you can imagine that if the founder of a protocol like Charles Hoskinson is going to have such a prominent role in a new potential government in the US, then you can imagine why the token might be rallying heavily as a result. If the founder is going to be shaping crypto policy, you might imagine that would be good for that particular asset. So that's one of the narratives that's really led to this. And obviously, ADA has a massive community. A lot of people love ADA. A lot of people are interested. And so I think we're seeing that across the board in crypto right now. You're seeing XRP, for example, rip, another place that has a very strong, very vocal community supporting it. We're seeing that with a lot of these older tokens, and obviously it's all relative, but Cardano was around in the 2017 cycle, then obviously a big mover in the 2020-2021 cycle. Now, a lot of those people are still around, and the big moves are happening with some of those more established coins. So I want to talk now about where might we see this rally heading. We don't really care about what's happened in the past. Where are we going in the future? So I want to start off by talking about some of our models and what they're seeing, then talk about some on-chain data, also talk a little bit just from a purely technical perspective, but where we might be heading next. So talking based on our models, we can look at our risk model. I like to always look at our risk models. They give a very nice idea of where we are in the market right now. So this is our long-term upside downside potential indicator. High values mean high risk, low values mean low risk. And you see this model has done a fantastic job of identifying these great buying opportunities for ADA, as well as these points where distributing ADA would make sense before a big bear market. So you can see that we got down to pretty low risk levels down through here. We were down just above -3, definitely a buy zone on this model's perspective. And then off to the races we've gone. Now we have moved up pretty aggressively. We're at a similar level to where we were near the local top of this run up back here in December of 2023, but we are nowhere near where we were, for example, back over here. So in the video I actually made very recently about Cardano, less than a week ago, that we were actually down at about neutral. And I was saying at the time that we probably had a good amount more room to run, certainly more room to run in this cycle in the longer term coming off of those levels. So what we might expect to see is that ADA does have a lot of room to work with here. So if we're going to continue on a full-on parabolic move, you'd expect us to be really the top of the scale would be the target. We'd be expecting to get up to 5. Anything short of that, we'd say we probably have more room to run. Do we have to realize all of that in this run? Absolutely not. It does not have to go up in a straight line, and it would not be surprising at all to see some kind of consolidation, even if it is something like this, for example, back in January of 2021. We zoom in here. We had this big explosion up that we spent some time chopping around sideways, and then the next big explosion up. This will happen in parabolic phases of a market cycle. That in hindsight, you'll go back and look at it and say, oh, we just went vertically up. But actually, if you were around at the time and you were in the market, you'll know that we actually spent a good number of days. It was basically the entirety of January going more or less sideways before we continue the rally. So that's where it might not be surprising to see something like that happen again. At some point, and I'm not going to be calling the local top, because with these pumps, you have to respect the rally. You don't know when it's going to end. It could end now. It could end in a week. It could end 2 days from now. Who knows, right? But at some point, it would not surprise me for us to have some kind of consolidation that could last, like we've seen in the past, up to a month or more before continuing. And of course, in hindsight, we'd look at that and just say, oh, it's just one big parabolic run. But in the moment, people might get really concerned. They might get really fearful, say, why isn't ADA moving up further? Is this the top? Are we done? And then it just goes on the next leg. And one of the benefits of that happening is it can let risk at least slow down or cool off, where instead of just risk continuing to shoot off, you'll see risk moved up here, then it kind of just hung out at these levels before we went and actually went to the top of the scale. So you might see is that if we get that happening again, consolidation or even a correction, that might allow risk to at least slow down or maybe even cool off, that actually would give us more room to work with going forward. So I would not see that as a bearish thing at all for ADA. I think that that is frankly a likely thing to happen. That before too long, we'll have some period of consolidation, but that would not be a concerning sign. Now, never say never. Obviously, it's crypto. Anything could happen. We could just go straight off to all-time highs here, leave everyone in the dust. Anything's possible. But I think if you just look at the past and how crypto assets tend to behave in these parabolic phases of the market cycle, there will be these breaks that happen that in hindsight, you just kind of ignore them. But in the moment, they actually can feel quite long. So I did just want to mention that as something that's a distinct possibility here. Now, one of the things that will probably tell us when we're entering into that kind of consolidation is our TCI, Trend Confidence Indicator. So let's actually first look at what happened in 2021, and then we'll go and talk about what's going on right now, because this will give us good context. So in 2020 into 2021, when we got to that January break that we were just talking about, we had the TCI shoot up aggressively here, but then start moving down pretty notably. And that was a pretty clear sign already by early to mid-January that this explosion was probably over, that trend was weakening, and that at best we were going to get some kind of consolidation before that reversal back to the upside, kind of the TCI moving down, and then that next big impulse to the upside that we saw over here. Let's now look at where we are right now. We're actually at a point where the TCI is the highest it has ever been on ADA. The strength of this impulse is the strongest that we've ever seen. Basically, this is something that's, we're in uncharted territory, basically, with ADA. And that's why I think you have to respect the pump, because until we see this cool off or calm down or stop going up, price is just going to keep going up. That's just what happens. When you see these big impulses, price will follow. But what I'm going to be looking for is what's going to happen once this reverses. When do we see that first strong move down on the TCI for ADA? That might be that sign that that consolidation is coming, and that could last a month, that could last 2 months, but it might ultimately be in service of a broader bull market. So I'm going to be watching that closely. We're not seeing that yet. It is still moving up. Until we see it move down, I'm not going to be fading this rally. But once that does happen, that's when I'd be more inclined to say, all right, this consolidation has probably come. It's time for us to spend some time cooling off, let risk cool off, or at least slow down before continuing the rally. All right, so what I also wanted to talk about is some on-chain data as it relates to ADA. I want to talk about two things: realized price and the percent of the total supply that is currently in profit. So let's first just talk about realized price, then we'll bring things together. So this is the realized price. It is the average cost basis of all ADA that exist. So basically, cost basis is what is the price at which you bought your ADA. It's the average cost basis, the average price at which people bought their ADA across the entire network. In the last video, I talked about how this was moving down throughout the entirety of this bear market into this reaccumulation phase, which suggested that a lot of people who bought their ADA up here had been selling at a loss. That's how you get this moving down. Basically, the average will move down if you're losing prices up here from the average and gaining prices down here in the average. Basically, people selling here are no longer counted. Then people who buy here are now the ones who are in this average. Now, notably, it's flattened, and just with this pump, we're starting to see it tick up. We're starting to see it move up. And what that means is now, on net, we're actually seeing more people who bought at lower prices selling and then buying at these higher prices, which is bringing the average up. Which means now profit takers are now going to be the ones who are driving the ship of selling. They're the ones who are kind of driving the selling, not people who are dumping out, capitulating at a loss. And so that's actually a good sign, because one of the things that you have to be worried about with an asset like ADA or anything that's been through a full cycle before is that you can have a lot of people who are holding ADA from these prices who then will be dumping out as things pump, adding a lot of sell pressure. But we're actually getting to a point where maybe they're getting largely exhausted, that a lot of the people who are going to sell, who had bought up here, have already sold. Now we don't have that top-down sell pressure, and now we just have to worry about the people who are going to be taking profit from down here. And the good news with that is that it doesn't seem like a crazy amount of that has happened yet, and it's possible that they're happy to hold for higher prices. If we see this start shooting up really aggressively, that's when I'll get more concerned. But you can sustain that for a while. Look at the last cycle, moving up aggressively on the realized price as people who bought here are selling to people who are buying up here. But then it's really when you get this explosive move up and then it start leveling out, that's when you want to get more concerned. When you start seeing this really kind of start leveling off, that's when a lot of these people are dumping out, and then you might be getting to this point where there's too much sell pressure, not enough demand coming in, and then that can lead into the bear market. We're not there yet. Now, I also want to bring in the percent of the total supply that's in profit or loss. That's what this teal line is here. And what we can see is that we were actually below 50% in profit back over here. We were down as low as in the 20% down at the bottom here. But then as we moved up, and especially as you'd expect, as we got above the realized price, now suddenly the majority are in profit. In fact, the vast majority are now in profit. We're talking about almost 93% of ADA holders are now in profit. And so that's what I was talking about before. That's how these data kind of tell us a nice picture, where a lot of the people who bought up here have already sold out. They capitulated, they dumped out. And so there's not a lot of people left who aren't in profit. There's some people from this range who are still holding, so they're not in profit because price hasn't gotten back up to them yet. But a lot of the other ones who had bought up here had actually sold. And that's why we were seeing realized price move down like this. But now with suddenly so many people in profit because they had bought down in this bear market or over here, now they're the ones who are going to be more likely to be that selling pressure. And it's really going to be a question of, do these people, seeing how explosive ADA has been, decide that actually I don't want to sell at break even anymore. I'm going to hold and hoping for new all-time highs. Very possible. And so that's where I think we actually might be entering into a new paradigm with ADA, where instead of it being capitulators driving the selling pressure, it's actually profit holders who might now start basically deciding it's time for me to take profit, get out of the market. So we'll want to watch these dynamics closely. The good news about this is that you can sustain a high number of people being in profit for a long time as you go on a big parabolic run. So we're just getting up there now. This is not at all to say that this has to be a top. We can sustain this for a long time before the actual top arrives. All right, so then to wrap us up, just looking at some technicals, the one thing that we do want to look for, and a reason why you might expect ADA at least take a break sometime relatively soon, is that we are hitting this range that was a massive amount of time that was spent on ADA over here. If we just go ahead and bring up the volume on the bottom here, tons of ADA were acquired through this period. Now, we just talked on-chain about how we know a lot of these people have already sold, but some haven't. So you might expect at least some people, so when you just go back on the on-chain, some of that, 7% that's left that's not in profit that sits here, to want to dump as we get back to their break-even price. They endured so much pain here that maybe they just don't have the conviction to hold for longer. And so that's where, when we were talking about maybe we get that kind of intermediate consolidation before the next leg of the parabolic move, this would make a lot of sense as being a place for that to happen. Now, where exactly in this range, who knows? Is it where we are right now at kind of $1, which is kind of the bottom of this range, all the way up to maybe even kind of $1.80, $2, kind of the bottom of this range? Somewhere in that ballpark might make sense. That I would expect that to maybe materialize. But I do think that could happen. And then what you might expect is as that happens, and then especially if price is moving up into it, if these people are selling and then a lot of people are buying, you might just expect in general this to kind of stay relatively high, kind of maybe even at some point get closer to bouncing off that 100%. We won't get to 100% until we set a new all-time high. There'll always be some people from here who are still holding, but you'll be in those high 90s. You might sustain this for a while. And then at some point, once things have cooled off a little bit more, that's when you might see that next leg up. So those are some things that I'm looking at with ADA. I think that it has been a very impressive rally that we've seen so far. And with crypto, you got to respect the trend. You have to respect the pump. Something that shows this much strength is probably not done in this point in the market cycle, especially given the fact that we're still in an overall kind of very bullish moment for crypto. I think really until the inauguration when Trump really actually takes over, I think in general, we're just going to be in a very bullish spot for crypto. So that's where even if ADA were to spend, for example, maybe a lot of December consolidating, it could still have a very bullish January until late January the inauguration happens, where maybe that's when we'd actually get a bigger sell-off in crypto as you kind of buy the election, sell the inauguration, kind of a possibility that could play out. But we have so much time until that happens. I really do think that even if we have longer term consolidation here, it would not be shocking at all to see ADA continue to move up. Now, one thing you do want to keep an eye on is that ADA is a relatively large market cap asset already. So at some point, it's going to be, joining the ranks of some of these higher up assets here. And that might just be totally what you'd expect. If you're an ADA bull, you'd say, well, it deserves to be up with Solana and with maybe even Ethereum ultimately. And so you might just be mega bullish and say, I don't think this is a large market cap at all for where I think that Cardano is going. But if you don't necessarily have that view, I do think that's worth watching and seeing how high this goes and thinking, is it the case that Cardano will just be able to rip off to these really high levels that we see at the top of the market cap spectrum up over here? Something else to keep an eye on. All right, if you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and follow us over on X. A lot of updates of our models and more over there. Also go to our website, ParityDigital.io, to see live data from our models and more.